Hello, everybody. It is Thursday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Joined for our weekly Zeise is Right video, not by Paul Zeise, who was on vacation, but by Post-Gazette sports columnist Jason Mackey. Jason, we got a lot to talk about in terms of Steelers, some rumors about them being in on a couple of big-name receivers, talk a little bit about the offensive line and their growth. We're also going to get into some Pirates and the post-Rowdy Tellez fallout. How are you feeling?
I'm doing great, man. I'm a little chilly. I'm here at the UPMC Lemieux Sports Complex for a Penguins practice. It's always cold in these things, but yeah, a lot going on, man. I'm doing well. This is cool to be on the other end of this thing for once. Normally, I'm having to be the serious one on First 10. It's nice to just kind of sit here and let you do all the hard work.
Yeah, exactly. Like the ad reads, which I'm going to do now. Before we get too far into the show, I want to thank our primary sponsor, Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. There's no better place to get new windows and doors installed in your home than Pella, who can help you save on energy costs year-round. Schedule a free in-home consultation with your local Pella Windows and Doors to find the right product for your home and budget. Give them a call at 866-593-1560 to discuss your project further. That's 866-593-1560 to get started planning on your new windows and doors installation with Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. Okay, Jason, let's get into this. ESPN's Dan Graziano wrote this week that he expects the Steelers to monitor the wide receiver market. I don't think that's going to shock too many people as a report. He had a couple of names, but before we get into the names, what is your level of urgency with the receiver situation? I've been arguing most of the week that the game against the Chargers proved that this offense works better when you have viable guys in the number 2 and number 3 receiving slots. And the question is, can Calvin Austin, Van Jefferson, Scotty Miller be what they were on Sunday with any consistency? I still think that's a dubious proposition. I think there should be some urgency in finding a veteran who can be a solid number 2. Where do you land? Because I know you were dubious on the Brandon Aiyuk trade conversation for a good chunk of the time. What's your read on the level of urgency 3 weeks in, having seen this team for real a few times?
I mean, Adam, I was dubious on the Brandon Aiyuk conversation because I didn't want to pay a receiver 28, 30, 32 million, whatever. Those were the rumored numbers. His contract came in at what, 20 million, 20-ish million. I like it a little bit more for that, but I mean, I sort of soured on the Aiyuk situation because of the Aiyuk situation, not because I suddenly think that Scotty Miller is going to be a dependable number 2 or number 3. I don't. I think the Steelers have legitimate questions at wide receiver, and the urgency should be high. I'm not trying to duck that part of it, and I think it is high. I mean, we're seeing they're leaving kernels of information on what they're doing and how they feel about their wide receivers. It's not just Aiyuk. It's not just Christian Kirk or DeAndre Hopkins or DK Metcalf or Cortland. I'm trying to think other guys that they've been linked to. I mean, they're out there. They're out there and they're shopping. They might not have found what they want in terms of price or return or something like that. But I think the Steelers are telling us that what they have, they know they need to improve upon it. And they're right. I mean, the quarterback play has been good enough. The offensive line has been good enough. I think we're looking at an elite defense. But what level can this offense get to if there's another level of wide receiver play? That's the thought that's rolling around in my head. These guys have been fine for now. It's been 3 weeks. If you stack the Steelers up against the Bills, the Chiefs, other elite AFC teams, they need more than they have now.
I agree. And that's why I think the level of urgency should be rather high. You teased the names that I wanted to get to. Specifically, Graziano mentioned DeAndre Hopkins and Christian Kirk. Let's start with Hopkins. I would like to note that he was available until late July last year. We had these conversations about the Steelers not having enough at receiver, even when Deontay Johnson was here. The Steelers opted not to make that move for Hopkins at the time. So I'd be a little suspicious of their interest in him at this stage, and considering you have to give up more than money probably to get him. But he did have 75 catches and 1,000 yards last season. Not completely washed up at 32, still a solid, productive receiver. What do you think of him as a potential option if the Titans, continue on their losing streak?
Well, Adam, I have a couple thoughts on that. One, we hear all the time about teams having interest, and that's fine. They should have interest. Like Omar Khan's not doing his job if he's not turning over every rock and looking for ways to improve the team. That doesn't always mean there's a deal, or like that the Steelers are chasing the Titans or whatever team around the block saying, give us your player like that, and I know that, but maybe listeners or viewers or whatever need a reminder. I'm not sure. And I like DeAndre Hopkins as a number 2. Like if he was their sole option, if they didn't have George Pickens, something like that. I mean, it's like the Van Jefferson discussion. I like Van Jefferson a lot as like a number 3, number 4. He worries me as a number 2 because of the type of coverage that he's going to see. If you can move him around a little bit, if he's your third option, maybe he works in the slot. Maybe you're talking about a 4-wide scenario where because of the defense they're playing, he might find a soft spot in the zone. I'm good with all of that. I'd be good with getting DeAndre Hopkins. I'd like to know what the return would be. If I'm the Steelers, I have to think very seriously about what I'm giving up. And the further this goes, and this sort of goes to your point about urgency, like if this defense is playing at an elite level, which I think it can, I think a lot of people think it can or want to see more, the Steelers have a winnable, reasonable schedule in front of them. The division is, I wouldn't say it's, it doesn't scare me at this point. Like they would be remiss not to try to upgrade that position.
What about Christian Kirk, Jason? He had 1,100 yards his first year in Jacksonville 2 years ago, 57 catches for 787 last year. He's efficient. He had 13.2 yards per reception and 13.8 in those last couple of years, respectively. Solid receiver, probably not a star, still 27. Do you like him more or less than Hopkins on that scale?
I might like Kirk more, Adam, just because I think there's more football in front of him. I think there's more of an opportunity to do things with him and let him grow, maybe alongside Justin Fields, George Pickens, whatever it is. That's nothing against DeAndre Hopkins. Where I come down on this, honestly, is what these teams are looking for back, and how that's – because I think the Steelers have to sort of walk a line here where they need to be cognizant of draft capital and what they have, but they also need to be cognizant of this season. Like the mandate from Art Rooney is clearly win now. We want playoff games. We want playoff wins. We want this drought to end. So, I mean, they're going to do everything they can to go after it this season, as they should. But that doesn't mean mortgaging the future, because they do have some things coming down the pike. You're going to want to improve your defensive line depth. Maybe offensive line is the place they want. I don't know. We could have a different discussion about that. Anyway, but I think I probably like Christian Kirk more. Because of the opportunity and room to grow ahead of him. I just want to know what the acquisition cost would be.
Yeah, and anytime I think with Hopkins, it's a question of how long could he viably be a piece of this organization. I think you look at Kirk at 27, say that's pretty close to his prime, and maybe he still has some pretty solid years in front of him. So I think the age difference there probably weighs in the desirability, but it also might weigh in terms of the acquisition cost for that reason. So it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out. Jason, I wanted to get your thoughts on the offensive line. I think a lot of people this week have been talking about that second half against the Chargers as, a potential turning point for this group in terms of cohesion and kind of reaching the ceiling that a lot of us think that they have. I am very bullish on this offensive line in the long term, but I have said for, probably 2 months at this point that I don't think that progression is going to be linear. You have a lot of very young players. They're going to get different things thrown at them by different defensive coordinators. And I think you're going to see games that look like Sundays where the first half, probably wasn't great. In the second half, they kind of put things together. They learned. They have the talent, but the development, do you think that is a turning point? Or do you think it is just going to be another data point on a nonlinear progression toward where we think this line can go?
Can I have both? Because I do think it was an important data point. Like I do. I think what they did on Sunday was something that offensive lines aspire to do. They ran the ball in the second half and physically dominated their opponent. Now, watching that, I should also add a formidable opponent too. Like, I don't think the Chargers are a bad team. They're obviously not a bad defense. Like, this was not an easy task. It took a little bit, and they finally knocked the building over. That's impressive. Now, do I think the offensive line is going to just flat out dominate the opponent every week? No, I don't. I think there's going to be growing pains, and there should for a group of young guys playing together. And yes, I completely agree with the idea that it's nonlinear. We've already seen that. I mean, they expected Troy Fautanu to be a significant part of this thing, and now he's probably done for the year. Zach Frazier's been outstanding. I like what they're doing with Mason McCormick at left guard. He's played some really good football. I mean, it's going to be a little complicated when Isaac Seumalo comes back because obviously you're going to play him. But getting Mason McCormick, assuming he proves he's worthy of the time, getting him more experience when he's probably your heir apparent to James Daniels on the right side, I like that, man. I like that a lot. Broderick Jones, I thought, had a decent game back against the Chargers. I know his PFF grade wasn't lights out. But, I mean, again, you're part of a group that gave Justin Fields time. They ran the ball effectively. So, anyway, Adam, I mean, I've been encouraged by the offensive line, given the injuries they've had to experience, the young guys they have coming in, the potential they have. I don't think it's going to be perfect, but I've certainly liked what I've seen so far.
Yeah, I think you do have to, look at the way they played in the second half. I think there's similar themes with the offense and defense of they've looked better in second halves and adjusted well. And I think that's a mark of good coaching that people always scream for. They always say, what adjustment did happen?
I thought Mike Tomlin didn't make second half adjustments. What are we talking about here? He can't adjust. He never adjusts anything.
People always scream about it when it's not happening in their eyes, but as soon as it does, they get no credit for it. So I do want to give Mike Tomlin and his staff credit for that. Jason, let's get into expectations. I think you alluded to it, in your wide receiver answer. But they're 3-0. You got a good chance to be 4-0. The Bengals lose on Monday Night Football. You have a 3-game lead on them. I believe they play the Ravens in a couple of weeks, so one of them has to lose that game. When does the expectation become compete meaningfully for a division title, or even consider yourselves the favorite for the division title, considering the way the other teams in this division have looked? And especially because of that, I don't think the schedule is looking as daunting as it did when we were sitting here in May looking at it and saying, wow, you got to face the Eagles. I mean, they lost to the Falcons, who the Steelers have beat, and the division is not looking quite as strong as I think some of us expected. How does that weigh into how you move the goalposts for success this season?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit, but I'm hung up, Adam, on the fact that it's September 26th. The Steelers have played 3 relatively good games to start. Being 3-0 is better than not being 3-0. I think I take a little bit out of that and say, look, a lot of people pick this team to finish last in the division. I don't see this as a last place team in the division. I see this as a team that's better than that. But that's pretty much all I know at this point. I'd like to think that, Justin Fields can continue playing the way he can. I'd like to think that they can get enough production from other pass catchers, that the defense is elite. And right now, 3 games in, I believe a lot of those things. But it's still only 3 games. There's still just so much to be played. I've watched a Pirates team start 9-2 and 20-8, and poof, look at what happened there. So I think we need to have some perspective, but again, I mean, the NFL season is shorter. Obviously, you're looking more on level of talent. And I look at the Steelers' level of talent right now and what they should be able to do, how they spend money, the upside of these guys. And yeah, I think about the ceiling should not be, or the acceptance should not be what everybody thought, 3rd or 4th in the division. I think they have the talent level to compete for more. And, I want to see them max 1 loss, 2 losses going into division play. I think that's completely reasonable. It'd be great if there were 0.
Yeah, obviously great if they were 0. I think, like you said, we see them drop games. I think of the Cardinals and Patriots last season of, inexplicable losses. You're probably going to have some of those along the way. It is the NFL. But, my question is, how much do those other teams in the division get it together to chase you? If you can, maybe you adjust things up. I said 10 wins. Well, maybe now I want to say 11 or 12 is on the table for this team. Sure. And is that enough to win the AFC North? I think we're going to learn a lot in the coming weeks here. Jason, we're going to get to some Pirates here, and there's a lot to talk about, so stay tuned. Before we do, just want to thank another sponsor. It's Goldberg, Persky & White. If you were diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer, call your local attorneys at Goldberg, Persky & White. For over 40 years, their firm has represented thousands of lung cancer and mesothelioma victims. Call 1-800-COMPLEX or visit gpwlaw.com for a free consultation.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.